Welcome, fellow Intel alums, to the second in a series of, how do I transition my career, get my resume together, and how do I search for jobs? This is the second, as I said, in the series of webinars. This is about modern resume development. But before we get started with that, let's do a little housekeeping. Can you please use the chat window for what the chat window is meant for, which is chatting with your friends, right? Or even maybe even, somebody else. Please try to put your questions in the Q&A. It's distracting for our fellow alum, Ellen Rico, to, kind of track both and feed Gina Riley, who is also another fellow Intel alum, the questions that you guys come up with. Now, this is a very august panel of people. Gina and Ellen are alums, but Sarah, Adrienne, and Ben are real pros in the areas of resume development and are not Intel alums, which actually I think is really good. Sometimes we Intel alums, we get a little bit too inwardly focused. And with that, Gina, I got to promote the January 9th. You got to sign up for January 9th. Gina's going to keep doing this until you guys say no. And with that, Gina, you got the floor.
Thank you, James. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're dialing in from. We would love to see you put in the actual chat where you are dialing in from, what you did at Intel, because we want to build community here when we offer these career transition webinars. So welcome, welcome. My name is Gina Riley. Yesterday, we did a Job Search Strategy 101 webinar, and that is on the Intel Alumni Network website now. So I am going to skip giving you a bio on myself and just say that I've got my trusty sidekick, Ellen Recco, who is going to be helping manage the Q&A. The Q&A is where we want you to put your actual questions and then use the chat to just talk out loud and amongst yourselves. Ellen's going to help me right off the bat. As I introduce our panelists, she's going to drop into the chat their LinkedIn profile links so that you can go and follow these people right away. Because if you're experiencing a career transition right now, these are the people that you want to be following for their amazing content. So let's start with Sarah Johnston. I'm going to do a brief bio and then we're going to jump right into the questions. So Sarah Johnston is a former corporate recruiter and industry insider. She's dedicated to empowering talented high achievers by equipping them with the necessary tools to succeed in their job search. Driven by her passion for empowering professionals, Sarah founded the Briefcase Coach. You need to follow that website as well. A renowned global executive branding firm. Operating worldwide, the Briefcase Coach has successfully served clients in all 50 states and across 6 continents. She's a certified UMAP coach, a member of Career Thought Leaders, and was named a LinkedIn top voice for job search and careers. I'm going to give you one little fun fact about Sarah. She has lived in multiple states as a trailing spouse. She's had to execute job searches in cold markets. She really knows her stuff from her own experiences, as well as advising professionals who are managing their career transition. Adrienne Tom. Adrienne Tom is the founder of Chief Resume Writer at Career Impressions, where she partners with top business leaders worldwide to create compelling career tools. A 10x certified career professional and 32x award-winning executive resume writer, Adrienne has been named a LinkedIn top voice for job search and careers, and her work has been published in 6 books, including Resumes for Dummies. One fun fact about Adrienne is she has her Bachelor of Arts degree in English Literature. She loves to read, and her must-read book list is 2 pages and growing. I love those bookworms, Adrienne. That's awesome. Ben Wiant. Oh my goodness, Ben. He works with professionals in career transition to create effective job search strategies based on the 3 doors job search. Check out his website. A foundational model to understand the modern job search. Organize your time and energy and design a plan of action to secure your next career opportunity. As a former professional recruiter, Ben knows what happens behind closed doors in the hiring process and shares his insights into what hiring managers are looking for, how to strategically access jobs, and overcoming the complexity of the modern job search. He earned a bachelor's degree in instructional systems from Florida State University, holds a graduate level certification in human performance technology and human resources development. Ben has supported thousands of job seekers through webinar presentations, facilitation of networking groups, and one-on-one client engagements. And the fun fact about Ben is he is a digital nomad. He is living his best life, and he and his spouse are 23 months into a 4-year-long journey. How fun! Welcome, everyone. Thank you, panelists, for being here. I appreciate you so much. We are going to jump right in to asking questions, and I have segmented this into some of the essential questions that everyone asks us all the time and what you all write about and speak about. And then we'll have some out of the box kinds of questions as well. More importantly, we are looking for the people participating today. I can see 84 people on the line. We want those questions to go in the chat. Ellen and I will try to manage those and answer those as we have them coming in. So my first question, panelists, and I'll try to, move this around to everyone. Sarah, why don't we start with you? Before putting a resume together, what do you think needs to happen?
I think the first thing that needs to happen is that you need to get clear on your targets. I was just talking to someone yesterday on the phone, and they were at a big tech company, and they said, Sarah, I really don't know what to do. I either want to be vice president of strategy and transformation, or I've been a chief of staff for an executive, and I'm torn between these two targets. And I said, well, you know what? We don't need to write your resume yet until you decide, because the language that you would use for a chief of staff is going to be different than the language that you would use for a vice president of strategy and transformation. There's certainly transferable skills there, and these roles, do overlap in a lot of ways. But we need to make sure that we align your story with what we know your audience cares about. So the very first thing you do before you get started is identify who you want to work with and for. So identify maybe 20 companies that you could see yourself working with or for, and think about your job targets. Spend some time sifting through job descriptions and get comfortable with that ideal next role.
I love that. And I don't know if the three of you have found this as you work with people, but when it comes to people saying, I do strategy, imagine that hundreds of other people are saying, I do strategy. You have to be really tight and sharp about what it is that you're applying that strategic on. So I would just insert that. Adrienne, do you have anything to add to that? What would you start with absolutely first?
So I have a little formula that I like to give my clients just before, or if they're struggling, with getting started with writing their resume. And I 100% agree with what Sarah said, and it's part of the formula, but I call it the 3 no's, the KNOWs. So the first no is you need to know yourself. You need to really understand who you are, what you're good at, what skills you're structured with, what you like to do. And then the second no is know your audience. Like Sarah said, what kind of job do you want? What are they looking for? What type of requirements are needed? And the third no is you need to know what matters most. And that's kind of like a marriage between the first 2 points, right? So once you know what you have to offer and what your target job is looking for, then you can really narrow your focus down and cherry pick information that is most relevant to that goal in order to really demonstrate alignment and expertise for that opportunity.
I love that so much. Formulas are the way to go. I am putting it in the chat right now. I hope I got it all correct. I was typing as you were speaking. Wonderful. Ben, I think that these first steps in even starting your resume are just so incredibly critical. What's your spin on what do you do before you start writing it?
I absolutely agree with both Adrienne and Sarah in the way that they approach this. And I take a little bit of a different spin on this, very much building off of what Adrienne said in terms of first you have to know thyself, but then you have to have clarity on your career and how those things that you know about yourself align with those things that you've done in your career. And so I think about resumes, I think about job search as a marketing and sales activity, and those are based on stories. And you've got these macro level stories, and then you've got your micro level stories that are represented in the resume bullets once you start constructing the resume. Now, first, you have to know, what are you bringing to the table? And not necessarily what got you to where you are, but what are you selling into the future? What is it that you're going to do in the future? And then framing up all of those things that you've done in the past in terms of what it is that you're doing now and in the future, because you're not selling what got you to where you are, you're selling what you have to offer into the future. And so I think that's one of the things that can oftentimes create a disconnect in the communication that comes through in resume. So know thyself, career clarity. Then I've got a third element to that, what I call storyboard, which is where we build out, how are you going to talk about it? How are we going to write about it? And then we can get into actually building the resume.
I love that. Know thyself, know what you have to offer, but know your target audience and know what the messaging is that they need to most hear, right? I love it. Thank you so much. Okay, so the next question is, everyone's going to love this. What are the most common mistakes people make on their resume? Adrienne, let's start with you.
Oh boy.
There's so
Like, how do you
many.
pick just one sometimes, right? And people do things innocently, right? So I'm not trying to point fingers here, but I think one of the biggest mistakes I see is people writing one general resume and using it for lots of different opportunities. And so in this modern age, with the introduction of AI, and now we have these like mass application systems, employers are getting inundated with applications for each opportunity. I think I was reading a study yesterday, it was on Pinpoint, that the number of applicants per job posting has risen about 46% in 1 year. And I see this number only continuing to grow, unfortunately. So for job seekers, that means when you're putting your resume together, you can't make the mistake of just throwing any old resume in the ring. You really need to tailor that resume, customize it for each opportunity. And like we talked about before, it's about that alignment, right? About knowing what that job is, knowing what the requirements are, and then making sure the resume is filled with the right information that demonstrates you're a great fit for that job.
I love that advice, and it ties back a little bit to what Ben was saying. A lot of times people get married to their histories and their stories, and there's some special ones to them, but it may not be the right story for the target audience in just to get the conversation going through the resume. And so hang on to those stories. They don't lack validity, but they may not be valid for potentially a 2-page resume, right?
You're absolutely right.
Oh,
One
go
of the
ahead,
things
Ben.
I'll add on that is I like to use the metaphor of a diamond, right? Light comes in, it refracts out in different ways, in different colors, and shines, bright in its own ways in each one of those. And so you think about your stories that you have, you can tell that same story from a leadership position, from a project management, from a program management standpoint, from a technical standpoint. So how are you framing that same event, that same story, that same period of your career? And how are you looking at that through different facets of that diamond in order to be able to tell a story that's relevant to the audience that you're speaking to?
Okay,
It's
let
such
me
a
jump
cool
in with a
metaphor.
question from the
Yes,
audience
go
that's
with it. I
totally
see it.
related. So someone says, I was told adding specific Intel results to my resume could overwhelm smaller companies. Our scale is so much bigger, so we could appear overqualified. For example, I managed a 2-year, $200 million project partnering with an external company, achieving blah, blah, blah results. The question is, how do we customize our results for maybe different size companies? Since
I
we're
love
talking
that
about
question.
how to
Sarah,
customize for the audience. Yeah.
thanks. Sarah, let's lob that to you.
I think first I would pitch this question back to the person who asked it. And I would say, well, do you actually really want to work for a smaller company? And do you want to deal with smaller challenges? A lot of times when I work with clients who are used to big company problems and big company budgets, they really want to stay in that lane. And the idea of going to an organization with, doing 5 million to 15 million in revenue is really scary for them. So I would do the gut check first and make sure that you actually really do want to work for smaller organizations. And then if the answer is yes, that you are actually really intending to target smaller organizations, I would say, think about your role and the challenges that you've been tasked to solve. And I'm sure that in your position, you are solving problems with smaller budgets, that maybe you're launching new initiatives, and that you are probably doing things that are first and innovative. Lean on those things. So sometimes when I work with people who are at large companies or maybe who've done consulting work for someone like BCG, we write their resume in a different format than we would write a traditional resume. We may choose to format it similarly to a traditional resume where you've got the name of the organization, the date range, but then underneath that company name, we might put transformational project as a subheader, and then give the project challenge, and then 2 to 3 bullet points underneath that project challenge of impact. And that's just a way to showcase that you've maybe worked with leaner budgets and that you've made a greater impact in the organization on that small project.
I love that. Ben or Adrienne, before we move to, we have a couple more questions in the chat. Do you have anything to add to that? Like how to position from, I say big to small?
I would encourage people to follow the thing that I took away from what Sarah was saying, and that is right size yourself to the right size organization. If you've only been in a very large organization, 20,000 plus employees, you've run teams that are bigger than some of the entire departments of the smaller companies, those smaller companies are not going to see you as a fit. So you may be spending your time unwisely trying to seek out roles with them because you're just they don't know what to do with you, right? And vice versa as well, right? If you've worked in small organizations and you want to work in a big organization, you don't understand the same problem sets in the management structures. You're used to wearing every hat and not being very siloed in terms of your capability oftentimes. And so be sure that you're really clear on that and how you're going to be able to pitch yourself if you're really committed to moving size organizations. How are you going to pitch that in a way that's going to be believable, right? That's the main thing. It's going to be believable to the hiring team.
Absolutely. And relevant. If anybody walks away with any one word that today, write it on a Post-it, write it in front of you, type it on your laptop. Relevancy. You need to be relevant to the decision makers that you're appealing to. Ellen, go ahead and read another question off.
Sure. I'd like to ask this one about ageism. If we're in our 50s, should we be showing every role we've had from the very start, or should we truncate and show only the last 10 to 20 years?
Woo! Who wants to take that?
Okay, I'll start. I'm sure everyone has information they could add to this for sure, right? It's a fairly common thing. So this individual's not alone with their concerns, let's say. I'm going to just say typically in a resume, it again boils down to relevancy, right? Just like Gina said. So oftentimes we tend to keep the resume to about 10 to 15 years of work history, the focus of the file. Now, let's say earlier in your career, you worked for a really prominent organization that's going to be very recognizable to where you want to be next, or you had a really big impact that you want to spotlight. You might want to reference that, but maybe you don't want to list your complete reverse chronological work history on your resume in order to get to that point. So there's a couple different strategies you can take. One is you can use the top third of the resume to maybe spotlight some of this scale and scope and draw attention to it from your earlier career. And another way that I often do for my senior executive clients is, once we hit a certain point in the work history, that 10 to 15 years-ish, and again, that's just a rule of thumb, we might have an earlier career history section on the resume. And this is a really succinct section that might only have your title, the company name, and maybe just the number of years you worked at this company, not the actual employment years. And this just opens up the possibility of a conversation. It answers some questions from the reader, but it doesn't necessarily age you, so to speak.
I love that. Thank you. And I'm seeing vigorous head nods from our other panelists. And all three of you are accustomed to working with boomers, Gen X, and now we have the millennials who are, now in their 40s, which is considered, according to the law, old. Age discrimination is a thing. I know. I'm sorry, Sarah. So Sarah and Ben, this is a hot topic. There are a lot of people on this line right now that qualify for the over 40. Sarah, what would you recommend that would be any different?
I co-sign everything Adrienne said, and I'm in full alignment with her. One thing that I do is if somebody worked early in their career for an organization that carries weight. So for example, McKinsey, Bain, BCG, Deloitte, these are tours of duty, as I would describe them. People really value this hard work that you put in early in your career. And it may have been more than 25 years ago. I might create an early career section, and Adrienne alluded to this in her comments at the very bottom without dates that includes these tour of duty experiences. And I may not fill in all the gaps. So it may be the last 10 years of experience and then that really early career experience, but I know that people are going to value that work depending on the industry.
Thank you. Ben, anything else before we go back to the Q&A?
I'm going to mix things up here and take a bit of a contrarian approach
That's
to
okay,
this.
because we all have an opinion. It's all right.
I don't disagree with anything that Adrienne or Sarah said. However, having interviewed thousands of people as a recruiter in the recent past, when you have somebody come in to sit down in front of you and have an interview, and they present 20 years older than what their resume designated, there's a bit of a shock to the system there. And you're starting off your conversation with somebody with a different thing on your mind, which is, what else is this person potentially leaving out? And so you have to be, I believe you have to be careful in terms of how much you obfuscate by not putting years or not putting graduation dates. I believe that if they're going to discriminate against you in the resume review process, they're probably going to discriminate against you in other ways once you get inside of the organization on the team, or there at least is a high potential for it. And so my advice to job seekers, myself, I'll be 50 next month, right? You know, over that age, own your age and you sell it as a strength, right? Own your experience and your seniority and your battle scars, right? Own that and figure out a way to be able to characterize that in a way that is a strength and not as a weakness. And I believe that if you want people to accept you as who you are, you want to be able to show up as your authentic self. You want those organizations to do that. Now, is that going to work? Is it going to eliminate you? Perhaps, but it's going to weed out maybe the companies that you probably won't have a good time at once you get there.
Hey, Ellen, would you mind going ahead and bouncing into the Q&A and give us another question? Thank you, Ben.
Absolutely. Yep.
So
Roger
let's
that.
circle
Okay.
back. Can we circle back first just to what Ben was saying? Because I'm
Oh, for
curious
sure.
about this. You know, this is a learning opportunity for everybody. So, you know, Ben, is there a way, like, would you rather see someone's complete career history over the last 50 years on the resume, or
No, I
is there
agree with
still a
what you all
cutoff
said
for
in
you?
terms of early career history and whatnot. But I think when people say, I'm going to truncate this at 15 years and I've got a 30-year career,
Sure.
and they just leave that information out and they don't even acknowledge the prior experience.
Right.
I think that's where we kind of start shifting into the territory that I was mentioning in terms of it's almost, it's not intentionally being disingenuous, but it is hiding information. And
It could seem that way, but what if they had put something in the summary of how many years experience they had? There's different ways you can kind of address it, right? So if you felt like it was addressed is where you would feel that maybe you were more prepared for when this individual came to have that interview, correct? As long as you kind of understood what that career history, but they don't necessarily need to put it all and share it all within the file.
Correct. And this is always, I think you all agree on this, is it's always a case-by-case basis when you're writing these with people. It depends on what type of role they're going for, what the organization's like, what we know about it, whether they have prior contacts within the organization and they've got somebody advocating and vouching for them, right? So that was one thing I'd say. Once you get over kind of the halfway mark of your career, your resume probably shouldn't be the number one tactic for getting your job. You should be networking and connections and being known inside the organization before you ever become a candidate.
1000%. I think that all of us here today would be head nodding to that effect, especially at the senior leadership levels. Sarah, do you have anything to add before we go to the Q&A?
Yeah, I see Robin's comment in the comments section about being in the early 60s, and I do want to address that. I agree in some parts with both what Adrienne and Ben have said. But I think for females especially, there's some prejudice. And I hope to goodness that when I'm 62 and 63, I look good for my age and people aren't asking, like, when are you going to retire? But I do think that sometimes when you are entering into an age that's close to retirement, everyone is wondering, when are you going to retire? When is that deadline going to be for you? And so if you're putting it out there that you're 62 or 63, people may pass over you as a candidate if they think there's going to be an end date for your employment. And so that's where, as a resume writer, I try to help mitigate that for my clients and help them present as the very best candidate for the role and leave age out of the equation.
Awesome. We could probably talk about age discrimination all day long. In fact, my LinkedIn post today is exactly about this age discrimination. It's a hot topic, and I'm sure it's a hot topic for the people on the line. Let's go ahead and move back to the Q&A, because I want to make sure that people are, getting those questions in, and there will be a shift in this time together where I will start pulling in the wisdom from the panel regarding applicant tracking systems and AI. So Ellen, what question would you point us to?
Yeah, I think another one that's pretty common is, what do you do about career gaps? Longer than a year. Let's say someone's asking about a 4 to 5 year, but we know they can come in all flavors.
Thanks for that question, whoever asked it, because I am sure there's a lot of people who would like to have this one addressed. Ben, could we start with you?
Actually, I'm going to defer to Sarah because she wrote an awesome LinkedIn post about it today that I
Oh,
commented on,
sweet.
and we're on the
I
same
was gonna
page.
say the
So
same.
let's have her, Sarah, talk about this.
Excellent. Thanks, Ben. Sarah.
Thank you for teeing this up for me. Okay, so I think that when you have an extended gap, the best thing that you can do is address that gap head on. We know that only 50% of hiring managers are going to actually read the cover letter. And the cover letter is a great place to explain the gap. I personally read cover letters and love them. But knowing that only 50% read the cover letter, I would include a very short statement underneath your last employment company name and date. Just leave a statement that says, like, part of a 10% workforce reduction, or relocated due to spouse's job, something that just tells people and fills in the gap of where you've been and why you've left the workforce. Now, for some people, I do think it makes sense to create an LLC if it has been an extended time period, as an option to show people what you've been doing during that time period. Even if you've done maybe 10 hours of paid consulting work, you've still done 10 hours of paid consulting work, and that can still be a gap filler for you. So in some cases, it does make sense to create the LLC, the LinkedIn company page, and use that as a filler on your website. Not to punt this to Adrienne, but I know that she works with a number of people with executive gaps as well. Do you have any kind of tips to fill in?
I was 100% on board with Ben here saying, like, sent it to Sarah, because I would have said the same thing that you said, right? This is a similar strategy I would take with the file. I feel, and like Ben has even said in the chat, like, overcome objections in advance. We as individuals, people are curious people. We need answers. And when people are reading resumes, it's best to address, not let the reader make assumptions, right? Because they could assume incorrectly. So I love the addressing of the gap, but I also agree that it should be done succinctly. It's not what you're selling. It's not what you want the focus to be on. You want the focus to be on your value and how you align with that opportunity. But again, just put it out there, and you can have that conversation in the future if it comes up again.
I also want to just mention, I did see that post. It was awesome. I made a comment, and for those who later want to look everyone up and follow them, look at Sarah's video post from today, because it was awesome. Ben, is there anything to add, or should we move to another question? Let's go. Okay.
We have a
Ellen.
lot of questions. Yep.
Oh, I know.
So,
let's do it.
So this is a classic. It's a specific about a pivot, but really the larger question is pivots. I don't want to work in tech or for a large corporation anymore. I might want to pivot to a city, county, or state job, et cetera, et cetera. Let's talk about pivots and how you execute them.
Oh, I love that topic so much. Which one of the panelists wants to go first?
I'll jump in.
Come on. All right, I'm going to pick on you, Sarah. Let's go.
So I'm answering this question about pivots.
Yeah, what would you do regarding targeting and teeing up your resume for a career pivot? And we are talking to a bunch of people that may have been at Intel a long time in technology, whatever that functional area of expertise is. So how do you take Intel Blue, all that experience, and then try to position it for something entirely different?
Yeah. So I think it goes back to really having a clear idea of that ideal next role, and spending a lot of time thinking about what they need in that particular position. Know that the top third of the resume is the part of the resume that is the most read part of the resume, the top third. And the top third is often the most read by the gatekeeper of the organization. And the gatekeeper could be the recruiter, the researcher, or the sourcer, the talent sourcer. And so they're comparing your resume to a job description. So you want to make sure that the top third of your document really aligns with that job description. And that can mean a header, that can mean an executive summary that ties your experience to that particular role. And that could also mean in pulling out 3 to 5 career highlights from your experience, throughout your experience, that align with that target that you're trying to go for. The other thing that I would say is that for pivoters, you have to have a compelling value proposition. So you might want to go back and listen to Gina's talk yesterday and really be able to articulate why you're wanting to pivot, your skill set, and why it's in alignment with that future target. And you're going to have to network. Like, yes, a great resume is important. Yes, having a great document is going to help you stand out, but you're going to get a lot more traction if you have those conversations with decision makers or people that can influence decision makers.
That's what I just put in the chat. You cannot
Having-
rely on your resume if you're doing an obvious career pivot, because you have to imagine that you're in a sea of other actual qualified people that walk and talk like the job description. So who are they going to talk to first? Their bias will be the walking and talking like what they're looking for. You must network, you must get conversations, and you must get referrals. Ben, what do you think on this topic?
Having worked in state government in a previous life, those applications are very different than corporate applications. And they, whether you want to call it a higher level of rigor or the specificity of what they want, they are wanting to see everything, right? And so it gets a little bit more difficult. You really need to leverage connections, and you have to have live human conversations with people so that they say, yes, we know you came from here, but look, we've just had this conversation and I get you, you get us. I know you could excel here. You need to have that kind of advocacy if you're trying. That goes for anything that you're doing to pivot. If you're not looking to do more of the same in relatively the same way, you have to get creative in the approach, right? The resume approach can be best for been there, done that, want to do more of the same in a very clear linear progression. As soon as you want to do something different, jump industries, jump role types, jump levels, whatever it may be, then you have to have a lot more conversations with people, because it's not going to be obvious. And you can speak to some of it on a resume, but it's not going to do all the job, because like Sarah said, you've got people that aren't as familiar with the ins and outs of the role doing the initial screen. And if they don't see it, the people that might be able to connect the dots better may not get a chance to see that document.
The thing that a candidate cannot rely on is the fact that they have potential, that of course they can do it. We all know inside what our capabilities are, but showcasing that on a resume when you don't align directly to the JD with your experience is a really difficult task to undertake. So start having those conversations. Definitely.
I'll say from
You go ahead.
I'll just go from personal experience is that I've never gotten a job off of a resume. Every single job I've had in every different industry, in every different role type, I've have one of these very diverse career river type of experiences, and not a career ladder. And so I know from personal experience that when people know you, you have conversations with them, they understand your capabilities and your competencies, they will give you opportunities that you would never get based on job description, resume matching models of hiring.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I want to
Sarah?
interject, if I may, a follow-on question. So there's a question in the Q&A, and it ties directly to this conversation, which is, do I have to network to get my job? Is that the only way? There's a high anxiety, obviously, of the people in the room. So help us understand the importance of networking, when it's appropriate, when it's not, et cetera.
I'm going to let the panelists answer this, but the resume isn't the thing that actually gets you the job offer. It gets you a conversation and gets you into the process. So it can be a door opener, but humans are hiring humans. So Adrienne, what would you say to this? Is the resume the only way?
Like you said,
So
no.
is networking
right?
the only way? Was the
Or is
question.
networking the only way? I'm so sorry.
Right. And the answer to that is also no, right? There's so many different avenues to explore during a job search. And we're talking about one of the avenues today, which is the resume, right? And that's to get that interview. There's networking, there's research, there's self-assessment, and working with different individuals. There's doing cold outreach and warm outreach, and there's so many different things that you can explore. And people often feel, I don't know what it is, like fear maybe when it comes to networking. We're all a little bit uncomfortable with the term, but honestly, it's just about building relationships, building connections, and there's so many different ways you can do that nowadays, including online, like on a place like LinkedIn, where you can start maybe a little softer if you're a little bit uncomfortable by doing some outreach and connections and engagement, and then work your way up to more in-person, face-to-face conversations. And I'm sure everyone has lots to add here, but I think diversifying your job search is key.
Sarah, how about you? Is networking the only way to get a job?
I'm going to agree with well, of course, Adrienne and Ben, but kind of echoing what Ben said. I am a trailing spouse, as what was said at the very beginning. And my husband has been in a role where we've had to relocate a number of times to areas where I literally knew no one when we were moving there. And I think what helped me land roles with top employers was I had a great resume. And I was using that resume to then send cold outreach messages that were very targeted and personal. And so I was applying for jobs online, but I was finding a champion in an organization who was willing to have a networking meeting with me. And that just really catapulted my job search by having that person who could vouch for me and who was willing to let me put their name down on my application.
Awesome. Thank you. Referrals are so great in that human to human connection. Ben, anything else?
No, I think
No?
I just dropped it in the chat too. The networking piece has so many other benefits of it, right? It'll help you get conversations with companies now, but you're also building your network of industry professionals, and you're becoming known inside of organizations that can hire you now or in the future. So the next time you end up in a layoff, or a recruiter calls you, or you decide that you need to change roles, specifically you decide you want to change roles or you get laid off, in those two situations you want to have a pre-built network inside of organizations that you could potentially work with. And so that's where the power of networking comes in, is you're not starting from scratch every time that you have to do this. And so you're getting multiple benefits out of that networking effort. And I agree with your comment there in the chat there, Gina, where you said 80% of your time should be spent on the networking, and then 20% or less doing that. I use similar percentages there as well. But most people spend 90% of their time doom scrolling job boards and submitting applications. And it's, whenever I ask people, what are you doing already in your job search? That's generally what people tell me, and they're not doing everything they can to benefit themselves.
I want to jump in. Thank you for that. I want to do just a slight twist and pivot, because it'll help us talk about the applicant tracking system, ATS, and the use of AI as well, because we're on the last half of our hour together. And Amy has a question in the chat about the Q&A about job titles. Do you feel like there's leeway on a resume to rephrase our job title to better align with industry standards? This is a really important question, not just for the resume, but all of you help people with LinkedIn profiles. So what would you say about that? Sarah, you want to start?
Sure. I would say that for LinkedIn, it's especially important to choose a market title. So you want to make sure that the title that you have is part of the category of titles that LinkedIn has. Otherwise, you will not be properly parsed from an SEO standpoint. So choose the market title that LinkedIn is suggesting for your role. For resume, this is perhaps a controversial opinion, but I view a resume as a marketing document. And so when your role maybe doesn't translate well to other positions or the industry, I think there's a little bit of wiggle room in the way that you position yourself. So for example, I was working with someone who had been with the same organization for 20 years, and their title was director, but they had P&L responsibility for a very significant portion of the business, and they had a lot of ownership in their specific role. we felt, based on looking at job descriptions that were kind of comparable to what they were doing, that their title did not reflect the scope of their work. So on their resume, instead of putting, let's just say, director of supply chain, we instead put head of supply chain and then in parentheses, director of supply chain, because we wanted to help them more align with the roles that they're targeting. Because recruiters who are scanning their resume and comparing their resume to a job description may automatically eliminate them based on kind of that quick glimpse. Now, I will tell you, I view an application as a legal document. And so I would always include your accurate assigned job title on your application.
Excellent. Thank you. We have so many questions. I'm going to say, James, we'll call you in later, but we may need to do another session because there's 11 queued up. There's no way we're going to get to all of them. So Adrienne, what would you say to this?
I would have said the exact same thing Sarah said,
Okay.
100%. So I'm not sure there's any other thing I can add to this.
No problem. No problem. Ben, any nuances?
I just dropped in the chat. The smell test for me is if you asked your prior manager, is this to capture what this person did? And they said, that's not what HR said they were, but that is what they were. Look, I had a title in state government that said program specialist 2 or 4 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
It was, and it had no description of what I do. My LinkedIn and my resume both say manager, project manager, change consultant. And I used all 3 because I filled all 3 of those functional roles over the course of my time there. And so, and it also, you want to create some continuity too, if you can, in your story on your resume, and making sure that it doesn't look like you're jumping all over the place, because sometimes companies use weird titles for similar things. And so how can you do it? But at the end of the day, there's a difference between being accurate and correct, right? Accurate meaning that's what HR approved and that's what it said in your HR file. And then correct meaning, yes, it describes what you did and it's and we can run with it, right? So, but do not make things up out of whole cloth, please.
Awesome. There are so many questions. It's hard to prioritize. I want to just do one out loud very quickly because I want you all to answer the cover letter question. But one question is, do people still call references listed in a resume? And some say to include it and others say don't. My take is you do not need to put references available upon request or references in your resume document. That is something that is expected down the line if you are the candidate of choice or maybe in the top 2, and then you handle that with the recruiter that you're partnering with, regarding that. So that is my quick answer. If we need more later, no problem. I'm happy to come back and circle back. But we have a couple on cover letters. So Adrienne, what is your take on cover letters? Should you do it for every single application? When do you do it? What do you say on them?
This is a big topic, really big topic these days. I'm going to say lots of people have different opinions on cover letters. You do a poll, you ask recruiters, you get different responses, right? So with that in mind, I'm going to say 2 things. One is you have nothing to lose by writing a cover letter for an opportunity so long as you do it well. Right? Don't go to AI and ask it to generate a very generic cover letter that you can slap on your resume and shoot off and hope that that's going to be a difference maker. It actually might be in a negative way. So if you're going to write the letter and you're going to put some, really good thought into it and it's going to be meaningful, then for sure, add that to your application. Will it necessarily be read? We don't know, right? That's the tricky thing. But if it is, and it has some great compelling information in there, it could be a difference maker. And I know Sarah's going to speak on this because she did some hiring lately. And I think the cover letter was something that she put a lot of focus on. And I think lots of companies do. But again, sometimes you don't know when you're applying.
Awesome. Sarah, I'll let you take that. And then I just really want to make sure that we pivot and get some AI topics in here. So Sarah, I know that you did that hiring. I've been watching your posts. So what would you say?
Yeah, I'll just quickly say, guys, I recently hired a position for my team and asked people to submit an answer to a question on my, as part of the application. I got over 100 applicants from a single position, which was surprising to me because I'm a small company, and at least 60 out of the over 100 gave me almost the exact same answer. And all the answers were very vanilla.
Wow.
And I could tell that it was written by ChatGPT. I would not consider myself an expert at prompts. I think you're talking to Ben, who I think is like one of like the leading career thought leaders on AI prompts. So he might have some good prompts for AI cover letters. But I'm telling you that there's a lot of noise out there, and the way to stand out in a job search right now is to be different and not submit a cover letter that feels like it was written by ChatGPT and says the exact same thing as everybody else.
2 snaps up. I couldn't even have said that better. I put in the chat, though, a link to an article that I wrote that has at least 7 other experts quoted on how to write a cover letter and so on. So click on that link and read that later. And the reason why you're going to read it later is I want to flip this over to an AI conversation. Ben, I'm just going to start it in a generic way. What role does AI have in resume development, let alone the cover letter? How do you apply it with your clients?
So I do not use AI to write anything for my clients' documents. So let's get that out of the way first. So let me talk about a progression here, right? When we talk about AI, we're talking about ChatGPT, Claude, we're talking about some of the consumer level AI tools that are out there, not enterprise level tools. Right, I've had a paid ChatGPT subscription for quite some time. I've actually even paid for having a custom engine written to help me with my content. I stopped using it because I don't like what it spit out, right? Forgive my language, I think that the AI at the point that it is now, it kicks out blah shit, right? It's horrible content, it's vanilla, it's all the same. But now there's a level of sophistication you can get into when you're writing prompts, right? So some of the things that I will use AI for is I will do analysis of a job description. I'll do analysis on a market. I'll do analysis on somebody's finished resume and see where there may be gaps there. I'll review someone's existing resume and see what types of capabilities the AI says it has and is being represented there, because it does some really interesting analysis and can tell me what the top 5 capabilities that this person has. Do the same thing with the job description, see where there's a match or a mismatch, right? So you can do some very quick analysis and figure out where there's match. And then you can do it after you create drafts, right? And figure out whether or not you're getting closer to it, and is the overall analysis of that document presenting what you expect it to. Now, when you write your prompts, you've got to think about these things, and I'm not going to get into a whole AI prompting lesson here, but I think the high level is unless you're using very smart prompts that have the AI walk through its understanding of what it's trying to give you, all it's going to do is go to its database of the internet and everything that it's consumed and guess the next word and give you what it thinks it should be giving you. I mean, that's what these tools do. They guess the next word really, really well, right? And so can you give it, the inputs that you give it are super important. Now, when I work with my clients that know thyself, that career clarity, that storyboard, I end up sometimes with 20, 30, 40 pages of content from my clients in addition to all the hours I spend talking with them about that. I've had ChatGPT do analysis on that and ask it to do it because I want to test it and see how good it is. It doesn't give the same quality because it doesn't understand all the market. It doesn't understand what's facet of the diamond it should be looking at. It doesn't know how to analyze all those things in a consistent way and spit out a consistent marketing message, right? Will it get there? Perhaps. Could highly sophisticated prompts get it there? Perhaps. But in the meantime, the best that I can say AI can do for you is if you have a really bad resume, it can rewrite it and reformat it and make it better, but it's not going to make it the best resume that you can take to market, right? The best resume you can take to market is going to be one based on the in-depth conversations and research that are done by yourself or somebody like Adrienne and Sarah and myself. Those are going to be what's going to create the right type of content with that framing that needs to be there for the appropriate audience. And the AI is just not there yet, right? Can it help reword things once you've written them? Sure, it can do some refinements and perhaps, give you different variations that you can pick and choose from. Let's be honest, right? Resume writing is not a natural format for most people. But we spend a lot of time writing resumes, and so we're very accustomed to it. But people in general are not. And they're trying to do many different tasks, which creates cognitive overload during the process. They're trying to do introspection. they're trying to do reflection, they're trying to do message crafting, and then they're trying to write it in a novel format of a resume bullet. And so when somebody sits down, a professional that's very good at what they do, and they sit down to do that process, that cognitive load is too much. And that's why people hate writing resumes. They freeze up, and then hopefully they come to somebody like us to help them, because we're able to break that into its constituent pieces and build up a proper document and a marketing message that's going to be effective for them.
Awesome. There's so much to unpack when it comes to AI. The other thing that we didn't address, and we're getting closer to the end, I want to make sure that we talk about the applicant tracking system, or as we all say all the time, the ATS. So Adrienne and Sarah, when you're working with a client, and all of our clients ask us this, like, is this going to be ATS friendly? What does that mean, Adrienne?
So ATS friendly means that when you're sending in your application to an online system, that the system, however it's set up, is able to parse out that information and search within it, in a nutshell. I know they're all a little bit different, and I know Ben has a lot of experience with ATS. So when clients want an ATS friendly file, for me, that means, number one, we're feeding the right information into that document. It doesn't matter that it's for ATS or a person. The goal is still the same. We want to have the right content and the right keywords within that file to help that application get seen and move forward in the process. And it means that there's no hangups in regards to the formatting of it that might prevent the system from being able to parse or read that information. That's in a nutshell. No, there are no robots that are just like ripping through the files and throwing them away and doing all these crazy things that you're reading on the internet, right? So it's a system, and it's set up by people, and it's set up in different ways, and it might be looking for different information or keywords, and that might impact the performance of your resume. So it's really about that relevancy thing that we've been talking about so much. That is really, really important for ATS.
Parsing. Sarah, what does that mean for the layperson out there?
Yeah. So it's kind of a complicated thing for people to kind of wrap their heads around, but it's quite simple. It's you are feeding information in a Word document through the applicant tracking system, and the applicant tracking system is in some ways like filling in like questions for you based on what they're seeing in the resume. And so they're parsing it or reading it. And some applicant tracking systems are even more sophisticated. They're leveraging machine learning. So for example, Taleo, which was used by approximately 20% of Fortune 500 companies in the year 2019, and Zoho Recruit have features that read the resume and they parse through it. They also give keyword ranks to the hiring manager. So they're looking at the resume, they're looking at the words that you're using on the resume, and they give the recruiter a score based on keyword match. Now, I'd want to remind people, and everything Adrienne said is so true. I think people overvalue this term ATS friendly or ATS compliant. Humans are still behind, reading every application. Ben and I both were recruiters, and I can say that I looked at every single candidate that came through my rec when I was sourcing and when I was recruiting. Now, I'll probably prioritize candidates that came in early because the search process is typically 4 to 5 weeks, depending on the role. The average time to fill is 47 days. So candidates that applied really late in the process didn't get as much attention or time. But I would say those candidates that apply really early on are going to get read. They're going to get viewed.
So I want to jump in here and add this. I've worked in a handful of these. I've implemented a few of them, and they all work differently. There's no rule book onto what ATS compliance means, right? And this gets to one of the comments that I saw just come in too, or the questions, which is the look and feel and templates. Do not use templates that you get off of Canva. They were designed by designers, and they were not designed by people that actually know how these things need a structure. When I sit down with my clients, we look at eye tracking studies of how people actually read resumes. I write resumes that align with the way people actually do it. For those of you that know about Jacob Nielsen's usability studies for websites that go back decades, the same premises still apply the way people read documents. And so we need to give them information where it's going to be most valuable for them, and we want them to be able to find it in a standard format. I've reviewed over 200,000 resumes in my career. And when you sit down to a stack of a dozen or 100, and all of a sudden you get a novel format, you're not finding the information where you want to have it. That doesn't mean that you can't have design elements in your resume, and every resume is going to be structured a little bit differently. But if you start doing columns and you start moving things around and using rating scales, all you're going to do is have your resume move faster into the no pile. If you're confusing the person that's trying to read it, if you make it hard for them to find relevant information, you're doing yourself a disservice. And so but when it comes to ATS, I'm actually writing a white paper on this right now because it's a really contested thing. And I'm doing research on all the different ATS websites to figure out what are they actually selling? What are the actual people that are buying and investing in these systems? What are they expecting their talent acquisition teams to be using these things for? And given the volume of resumes that are coming in, given the amount of easy apply processes that people can get their thing, and the hundreds, if not thousands of resumes coming in, companies are expecting the technology to parse out and vet and rank and make their jobs more efficient. There's a lot of, I used to look at every single resume too, but there's a point at which a recruiter or a team of recruiters is not going to be able to effectively read through thousands of resumes. And these, they're trying to do more with less, and they're going to want these technologies to actually read these things. So make sure it's written for the humans first. Make sure that it's a clean document. It doesn't have weird formatting. There's some basics out there. We've probably written about it a dozen times, but don't overcomplicate it. Keep things simple.
And there's a scam going on right now that I want to make your listeners aware of. I've gotten 2 emails in the last week and a half from people who are executives, and they're putting their resume into a database for more executive opportunities. And there's one company in particular called topexecutiveshunt.com.
Oh.
And as soon as a candidate uploads their resume, they get an email from someone who's an expert resume writer. And no matter how their resume looks, they're getting the same feedback that the resume is not ATS compliant. And it's a lot of fear mongering. So my advice to you, job seekers or listeners, is to really understand where that person is making money and what their objective is, because in this case, they're trying to sell a new service, even though the candidates had really strong documents.
That's a
And it's probably an AI automated resume writing service.
Ugh. All right, we only have 4 minutes left. That means that I really cannot take any more fresh questions. What I would love for the people attending to do, if you would not mind, is in the chat, let James, Howard, myself know if you want to see more content like this. Should we have this group of panelists back, if they will allow us to do that? I can see there's a lot of hot topics for us to cover. So, let us know what you want to hear about, because the job search and career transition process is not only about the resume, as we talked about. We talked about AI, we talked about ATS. There's many more things that these people know a lot about as well. So let us know in the chat right now, and then reach out to James, reach out to Howard, send them emails, send myself a message, connect with these 3 amazing people, and or at least follow them. Follow them on LinkedIn, because their content is amazing. That's why I brought them in. I also put in the chat all of their websites and some of the giveaway options. I would sign up for any of these people's newsletters, anything else that they have, because they work really hard at providing valuable content for job seekers, absolutely for free, which is unbelievable. If you're interested in their services, reach out directly to them, and they can walk you through their process, etc. James, let's pull you back. Adrienne,
ma'am.
Sarah, Ben, thank you. I appreciate all of you so much.
Thank
James,
you.
Hey,
Yeah.
you guys, you did it again. You hit it out of the park. You're 2 for 2. This is marvelous. And then everything you've said absolutely resonates with me. I think I mentioned yesterday, I've hired probably over 100 people in my career. I have seen more than my share of careers. In my retirement, I mentor everyone from 18-year-old kids to 45-year-old professionals. And everything, folks, that you heard from this panel discussion is 100% spot on, right? So you got some real pros here. I highly encourage you to reach out to these folks, talk to them. I know this has been a very difficult time for a lot of people coming out of Intel. Our hearts are, bleed for you, but this is why this organization exists. We're here to help support each other, create community. And remember, be kind to yourself And if you got time, be kind to somebody else. And the last little piece of advice that I will give as an old guy, when somebody asks me, well, I'm looking for a job and I want to do this, that, and the other, the first thing I always ask is, tell me your story. And I don't care what the story is, right? You can start that, God formed the earth, right? Wherever you want to start. Because when someone starts telling me a story as someone who's going to advise or hire, how they tell it, what they emphasize is really important. So spend some time in reflecting. What is your story? What is the arc of your life, right? And with that, Gina, we've got January 9th coming up, and I've been, that's going to be focused on the job hunt itself.
Job search
But I tell
strategy.
you, there's demand for more discussion around this modern resume writing topic. So if you guys are game, I think we're game. We'll just have to plan around what we do in January. Maybe we do 2 more sessions, 9th and the 10th. We'll take that offline and we'll start planning. Also, for you Intel alums out there, we will be doing continued Gen AI discussions in the next year, as well as the future of semiconductor manufacturing and Moore's Law. So take a look for those invitations as well. And with that, Gina, any last comments before we exit stage right?
I want to thank Ellen Recco for, again, helping and jumping in. I really appreciate you. We're all here in service of job seekers. I mean, we're all here, this is what we do. We live and breathe this content. So hopefully you found value in it. Please go follow everybody. And there's a lot of free information to be had if you're not looking to invest in something like that. But if you are, please reach out to any of these panelists. They are amazing.
And I believe the video is going to be posted. Is that right, Michael?
Yes. Yes, we'll figure that out.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and remember,
Thanks.
guys, all previous online events that we have run are all on intelalumni.org. Go to events, go to past events, and Michael will have this up in a day or two. Yesterday's session is already up there if you want to either watch it again or share it with a friend. I encourage you to do that. Remember, we're a community of people worldwide. We got over 5,000 members. Fortunately and unfortunately, our membership has taken a bump up here in the last 3 months. That's because unfortunately our previous company is going through some very difficult times, which is sad for a lot of us. And with that, have a great rest of your day and have a great holiday season.